You've been taught that if someone pulls away, you chase. And that's exactly why they keep pulling away. Here's what nobody tells you. The avoidant person in your life is not broken. They're not heartless. And they are absolutely capable of texting you first, calling you just to hear your voice, and showing up consistently. But not for the person who's always available. Not for the person who makes it easy. They show up for the person who makes them feel something they can't quite explain. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how to become that person. If you stay until the end of this video, you're going to understand why avoidants chase the people who seem least interested in them, and how you can use that psychology without playing games, without being fake, and without losing yourself in the process. Before we get into it, if this kind of content speaks to you, comment the word magnetize below right now. It tells me you want more of this. And make sure you're subscribed, because what's coming next in this series will completely change how you show up in every relationship you have. Now let's talk about what's actually happening inside the mind of an avoidant person. Because once you understand this, everything changes. An avoidant person grew up learning something very specific. They learned that needing people is dangerous. Not because someone sat them down and told them that, but because every time they reached out for connection, something uncomfortable happened. Maybe their feelings were dismissed. Maybe a parent was emotionally unavailable. Maybe they were told to toughen up one too many times. So over years and years, they built a wall. A very sophisticated, very convincing wall. And that wall has one job: to protect them from the pain of needing someone who might not be there. Now here's where it gets interesting. That wall doesn't mean they don't want connection. It means they want it desperately. They just don't trust it. And so they do this thing that looks confusing from the outside. They get close to someone, they feel the pull of intimacy, and then they panic and pull back. Not because they don't like you, because they like you a lot. And that's the scary part for them. So when you chase an avoidant, what you're actually doing is confirming their deepest belief that closeness leads to pressure, that love means losing yourself. Every text you send when they go quiet, every time you ask, "Are you okay?" or "Did I do something wrong?" you are reinforcing the idea that getting close to you means getting overwhelmed. And so they pull further back, not to hurt you, to survive. But here's the flip side. And this is the part that changes everything. When you stop chasing, when you suddenly seem less available, when your energy shifts and you're no longer orbiting their world, something wakes up in them. A curiosity, a mild panic, a quiet voice that says, "Wait, where did they go?" And that voice is the beginning of everything. This is not manipulation. This is not a game. This is understanding human psychology at a very deep level and deciding to use it with integrity. Because here's the truth. You cannot make someone love you more by making yourself smaller, quieter, more accommodating, more available. You make someone feel your value by living in your value. And that is what we're building today. Let's start with the first principle, and it's the one most people completely misunderstand. Your availability is your currency. And right now, you might be spending it like it's worthless. Think about it. When something is available all the time, you stop noticing it. You stop appreciating it. You take it for granted. Not because you're a bad person, but because that's just how human psychology works. We value things based on scarcity. We notice things when there's a chance we might lose them. And you have been showing up with zero scarcity. You've been the person who always responds immediately, always has time, always adjusts their schedule, always makes it work. And while that comes from a beautiful place in your heart, it's communicating the wrong thing to an avoidant brain. The avoidant brain hears your constant availability as pressure, as need, as something that's going to consume them, and so they run. But when you become someone with a life, when you become someone who sometimes takes a few hours to reply, not because you're playing games, but because you genuinely have things going on, when you become someone who isn't always free, that changes the dynamic entirely. The goal is not to be unavailable. The goal is to be full, to be so genuinely engaged with your own life that your attention becomes something worth earning. And that shift, that real genuine shift in how you operate, is what starts to pull an avoidant toward you. So let's talk about what that actually looks like in practice. Stop responding within seconds every single time. Not because you want to send a message, but because you have a life and sometimes you're living it. When they text you at 11 at night after 3 days of silence, you don't have to jump. You can reply in the morning, not to punish them, because you were asleep, because you matter, because your time is as valuable as anyone else's. Here's something that will feel counterintuitive. When an avoidant goes quiet, the worst thing you can do is fill that silence. And the best thing you can do is let the silence work for you. That silence, when you're not panicking in it, when you're not sending the follow-up text and the check-in message and the hey, just wanted to make sure we're okay message, that silence becomes a vacuum. And nature abhors a vacuum. So does an avoidant person who suddenly can't feel your presence anymore. When you stop filling that space, they have to sit with the absence of you. And that absence starts to feel louder than any text you could send. Now, the second principle is just as powerful. It's about how you show up in the moments when you are present. Because here's what most people get wrong. They think the solution is to be less present overall, to be cold, to be distant, to match the avoidance emotional unavailability with their own. That's not it. That's just two walls facing each other and calling it a relationship. The real move is to be deeply, authentically, irresistibly present when you are there. And then to have a life outside of them that is equally real. What does that mean in practice? It means when you're on a call with them, you're fully there. You're engaged, you're laughing, you're sharing something real. You're making them feel like the only person in the world in that moment. And then the call ends and you go live your life. And you're not sitting by the phone. You're not refreshing your messages. You are genuinely elsewhere. This combination, full presence followed by full departure, is intoxicating to an avoidant person because it mirrors the kind of connection they actually want. Deep, but with space. Warm, but not suffocating. Real, but not consuming. You stop being the person they need to run from, and you start being the person they want to run toward. Let me tell you something about the nature of avoidant attraction, because this is the piece that unlocks everything. Avoidants are attracted to emotional safety, but not the kind of safety that comes from someone being endlessly accommodating. That kind of safety feels like a trap to them. The kind of safety that attracts an avoidant is the kind that says, I'm not going anywhere, but I also don't need you to complete me. It's the safety of someone who is stable within themselves, someone who doesn't fall apart when you don't text back, someone who doesn't turn every moment of distance into a crisis. When you are that person, when you genuinely embody that energy, not as a performance, but as a reality, the avoidance nervous system starts to relax around you. And a relaxed avoidant is an avoidant who can finally let someone in. So how do you become that person? You start by doing the work on yourself that most people are trying to outsource to a relationship. Most people are going into relationships saying, fix me, fill me, make me feel okay about myself. And an avoidant person can sense that from a mile away. It makes them want to run because they can barely handle their own emotional weight, let alone yours. But when you walk in as a complete person, someone who has their own sense of identity, their own passions, their own friendships, their own source of joy that has nothing to do with whether this person texts them back today, you become the most attractive version of yourself that has ever existed. And I'm not being dramatic. This is the difference between someone an avoidant stays curious about and someone they eventually ghost. The third principle is about communication. And this one is going to surprise you. Most people think the way to reach an avoidant is through deep emotional conversations, through honesty about your feelings, through saying things like, I need to know where this is going, or I feel like you're pulling away and it's hurting me. And I'm not saying those conversations are never appropriate, But timing and delivery matter enormously when you're dealing with someone whose first instinct when emotional pressure arrives is to shut down. Direct emotional processing conversations trigger an avoidance defense system. The moment they feel like they're being called to account emotionally, the walls go up and you lose access to them. Not forever, but for a while. And every time that happens, the pattern gets reinforced. Instead, here's what works. Light, fun, low stakes. When you do reach out, make it about something real and interesting. Not about the relationship, not about feelings, something that's genuinely engaging. A funny thing that happened to you, a question you're curious about, a story that you know would make them laugh, a shared interest that reminds them of why they liked talking to you in the first place. This is not about being fake. It's about understanding that with avoidance, connection happens sideways. It sneaks up on them when they're not bracing for it, when they're laughing, when they're genuinely interested, when they forget for a moment that they're supposed to be guarding their heart. That's when the real bond forms, not in the heavy talks, in the light moments that accumulate over time. Now, once you've started applying these principles and you're seeing little shifts in their behavior, maybe they're initiating more, maybe the conversations are lasting longer, maybe there's a warmth that wasn't there before, this is where most people make the fatal mistake. They get excited and they accelerate. They lean in too fast. They start pushing for commitment or clarity or a defined relationship, and they undo all the progress they made. Here's the rule when you start to feel the pull coming from their side. Match it, but don't exceed it. If they text more, you text more. If they open up a little, you open up a little. But you don't suddenly send the emotional essay you've been drafting in your notes app for 3 weeks. You don't push for the relationship talk the moment they show a little warmth. You let the momentum build naturally. You trust the process. Because here's what's happening when an avoidant starts reaching out more. They are testing the water. They are dipping a toe in and watching to see what happens. Are you going to grab them and pull them in? Or are you going to stay calm and let them decide how deep they want to go? The person who stays calm wins every single time. Let's talk about something that people never discuss when it comes to avoidance, and it might be the most important piece of all. Your emotional state is contagious. When you are anxious about the relationship, when you are in that constant low-level panic of not knowing where you stand, when your self-worth is tied to whether they text you back today, that energy radiates. You can't hide it. It comes through in every text, in the timing of your replies, in the subtle tone of your voice on a call, in the way you say goodbye and then add one more thing because you don't want to hang up. Avoidants are extremely sensitive to emotional energy because they had to be. They grew up reading the emotional atmosphere of their environment very carefully. And when they pick up on anxiety from you, it activates their system. They feel the pressure and they retreat. But when your emotional state is genuinely settled, when you have done the work to stop tying your worth to their behavior, when you can genuinely say to yourself, I like this person and I hope this goes somewhere, and I also know I'm going to be fine if it doesn't. That energy changes everything. They feel it. And it is the most attractive thing you can project. This is not about pretending to be fine when you're not. This is about doing the actual inner work so that you really are fine. And that work looks like a lot of things. It looks like investing in your friendships. It looks like pursuing the goals you've been putting off. It looks like going to therapy if you need to. It looks like building a life that is so genuinely fulfilling that one person's inconsistency doesn't collapse your entire world. When you build that life, you don't just become more attractive to an avoidant, you become more attractive to everyone, and you become more attractive to yourself. And that matters most of all. Let's talk about the moments when an avoidant shows up, because how you handle these moments is everything. when they do text you, when they do call, when they reach out after a period of distance, the worst thing you can do is immediately address the distance. Don't say, "Oh, finally you texted," even as a joke. Don't bring up the fact that you haven't heard from them. Just be genuinely warm and in the moment. Engage with what they're bringing to you right now. Let the conversation be easy. What this does is profound. It shows them that spending time with you doesn't come with an emotional invoice. That connecting with you doesn't mean they're going to have to sit down and explain themselves. That being with you is easy and safe and good. And slowly, they will start to seek that feeling more and more. Because here's what avoidants are really looking for, even though they don't know how to say it. They're looking for the person who makes closeness feel safe, who makes intimacy feel like something they chose rather than something that was demanded of them. When you are that person, when being with you feels like breathing out rather than holding your breath, they will not want to stay away. Now, here's something really important that I want you to hear clearly. Not every avoidant will be ready to show up in the way you need. And part of this work, the deeper part, is knowing the difference between someone who is growing toward you and someone who is simply using your availability and emotional generosity without any intention of meeting you halfway. There are avoidants who, with the right dynamic, can and do become consistent, loving partners. And there are avoidants who are at a stage in their own journey where they simply cannot offer what a real relationship requires. Your job is not to be a project manager for someone else's healing. Your job is to be so rooted in your own worth that you can tell the difference. And when you see that someone is not actually moving toward you despite your best efforts, you have the self-respect to move on. Because here's the truth that most people are afraid to say out loud. The most powerful thing you can do in a relationship with an avoidant is be genuinely okay with walking away. Not as a tactic, not to make them chase you, but because you actually are, because you know your worth, because you have a life that exists beautifully outside of this one connection. That energy, the energy of someone who can genuinely leave, is the energy that makes avoidants wake up. Not because it triggers their fear of abandonment, although sometimes it does, but because it communicates something deeper. It communicates that you are a person of value, that being with you is a privilege, that the door is open, but it will not stay open indefinitely. And when an avoidant understands that, when they feel in their bones that you are not going to wait forever, many of them will choose to walk through that door before it closes. Not all of them, but the ones who are genuinely capable of growth, yes. Let's talk about texting specifically, because this is where most people get it wrong in very specific and fixable ways. Stop over texting. I know you know this. I know you've told yourself to stop, but knowing and doing are different things. So let me give you something more concrete. The goal is not to have the last word in every conversation. The goal is to leave them wanting more. Every conversation you have should end at its peak. Not when it's dying, not when you've run out of things to say, at the moment when things are good, when there's energy, when there's warmth, that's when you pull back. You leave them in the best possible version of that feeling. And they will come back because they want to feel it again. Think about your favorite TV show. Does it end episodes at the boring part? No. It ends at the moment that makes you desperate for the next one. That's what you're doing with your conversations. You are creating a reason to come back. And when you do text, make your texts worth reading. Not long, not heavy, not emotionally demanding. Short, interesting, playful where appropriate, real. The text that gets a response is not the one that says, "Hey, haven't heard from you, just checking in." The text that gets a response is the one that says something specific and interesting that reminds them why talking to you is enjoyable. Stop asking questions that put them in the position of having to explain themselves. Questions like, "Why didn't you text me yesterday?" Or, "Are you losing interest?" Or, "Where do I stand with you?" activate the defense mechanisms. Instead, ask questions that invite them into something fun or interesting. Questions that don't carry emotional weight. Questions that make engaging with you feel like a pleasure rather than a responsibility. Here is something that takes real courage to hear. Sometimes the reason an avoidant is not texting you or calling you every day is because you have unconsciously positioned yourself as someone who needs them to. And no one, avoidant or not, wants to feel like someone's emotional lifeline. When you shift that dynamic, when you stop needing them to reach out and start simply enjoying it when they do, the entire texture of the interaction changes. They stop feeling responsible for your emotional state. They stop feeling like every text they send is a commitment they might not be able to keep. They stop feeling like showing up means signing a contract. And when that pressure lifts, many of them will naturally reach out more because it's now genuinely something they want to do rather than something they feel obligated to do. Now I want to talk about something that lives underneath all of this. Something that is at the root of why you are in this situation in the first place. And this is the part where I need you to really listen. You are attracted to this person partly because of their unavailability. I know that's hard to sit with, but it's true. There is something about the emotional distance, about having to work for their attention, about the highs and lows of their inconsistency that is familiar, that feels like love to you, even if it's causing you pain. And that pattern, that blueprint for what love feels like, was written a long time ago, probably in childhood, probably by someone who was important to you and who was not fully available to you. This is not a character flaw. This is a very human response to a very human experience. But recognizing it changes things. Because when you see that pattern clearly, you stop being a passive participant in it, and you become someone who can make conscious choices about it. You can say, I see why I'm drawn to this dynamic, and I'm going to choose to be with someone who is consistently available, emotionally present, and genuinely interested in building something with me. And I'm going to work on myself so that the steady, available, emotionally mature person feels just as exciting to me as the unavailable one. That is the real work. And it is the work that changes not just this relationship, but every relationship after it. Now, does all of this mean you have to give up on the avoidant person in your life? Not necessarily, but it means you have to approach them differently, from a place of wholeness rather than hunger, from a place of genuine self-worth rather than the hope that their attention will give you worth, from a place of interest without desperation. And when you do that, one of two things will happen. Either they will feel the shift in your energy and they will start to show up differently, more consistently, more warmly, with more effort, or they will reveal that they were never going to be capable of that regardless. And either way, you will have your answer. And either way, you will be okay. Let's bring this all together and talk about what the actual daily practice looks like. Because this is not a one-time mindset shift. This is a new way of operating. Every day you invest in your own life. You do something that fulfills you. You see a friend. You work on a goal. You take care of your body. You create something. You learn something. You build a life that you are genuinely excited about. Not to perform happiness for someone else, because you actually want to live well. Every day you check in with your emotional state before you reach out. Ask yourself, am I texting from a place of genuine desire to connect? Or am I texting from anxiety, from the need for reassurance, from the fear that they're losing interest? If it's the latter, you don't send the text. You go do something good for yourself instead, and you reach out when you're in a better place. Every day you practice being the person you want to be in this relationship. Not the anxious, grasping, please notice me version. The grounded, warm, interesting, secure version. And you practice it whether or not they are watching, because eventually the practice becomes the reality. And the reality is what attracts. You stop waiting for them to choose you, and you start being someone you would choose. And something remarkable happens when you do that. You start to feel less desperate, less dependent on their specific choices, more like yourself, more like someone worth choosing. And the energy that comes off of you in that state is unlike anything you can manufacture through strategy or games. It is real, it is magnetic, and avoidants, for all their defenses, can feel it from across the room. Here's a truth I want to leave you with. The goal was never to make an avoidant text you every day through tricks or manipulation or psychological games. The goal is to become someone whose presence adds so much genuine value, whose energy is so grounded and warm and self-assured, whose life is so full and interesting that the avoidant person in your life chooses to show up consistently, because showing up is genuinely what they want to do. You can't force someone to open their heart, but you can create the conditions where opening feels safe, where opening feels worth it, where the risk of getting close doesn't feel nearly as dangerous as the prospect of losing you. That's the work. It starts with you, it ends with you, and everything in between, all the texts and calls and moments of connection, those are just the natural result of someone becoming so fully themselves that the right people can't help but want to be around them. You don't need to chase, you need to grow. And when you grow into the fullest, most grounded, most genuinely alive version of yourself, you will not be waiting by the phone wondering if they're going to text. You'll be living your life, and they will be the one reaching for their phone, typing your name, hoping you have time for them today. That is what you're building toward, and you are more capable of it than you know. Start today.